All right, hello again, everyone. Welcome to our small panel session, not like the keynote panel where, I don't know, there are 8 or 10 of you up there on stage. So my name is Gerry Gebel. I'm with Axiomatics, and I'll be asking our two guests here some questions here and asking them to share some of their thoughts on what it means to have a digital transformation program and what that means for your identity and access management infrastructure. So by way of introduction, Kaushal Patel, you're digital lead for, digital IAM lead for EY in the Americas here. Mark Prohaska is IAM tech lead at NextEra Energy. But Kaushal, can you expand a little bit on your introduction here for the audience?
Sure, Gerry. Good morning, everyone. And first of all, thanks to the Axiomatics team and Gerry personally for giving me the opportunity to speak with all of you this morning. And hopefully you enjoyed and took some time of going around the Windy City and took the time to enjoy the Cubs game. So I do remember some of you meeting there, and thank you for approaching me. With respect to my background, a number of things. I've been with the EY for about 2+ years, looking at a number of things, one being the digital transformation, as Gerry mentioned. So I lead up the digital practice globally, and more specifically within the 5 sectors here in Americas. Focusing on the retail sectors, automotive sectors, power utilities, which is why I'm here up with my good friend Mark. And then third, we also look after the managed services, which is essentially known as the cyber as a service. So we do extend our relationship with the clients from the beginning, from the formulating the strategies to implementing to also then operationalizing these solutions, be in the power grids or nuclear centers to ships, as we spoke about a few days back. And then outside of that, we also look after some of the evolving technologies around blockchain. So those are sort of the 3 pillars that I run within the practice here in America. Prior to joining EY, I had extensive experience and background in financial services, where I spent 14 years with Bank of America, of which first 7 years were within the capital market space, within the trading technologies. Worked on a number of trading platforms, derivatives, commodities, and exotics. As most of you know, in the middle of 2000, the markets weren't doing as great. So during that time, I actually pioneered my very own IAM solution known as Access Request Management for Bank of America, specifically where we extended the solution out to 10,000 applications across this fabric of retail banking, consumer banking, capital markets, wealth management. And then lastly, extending that out into also meeting product capabilities specific to certification, governance, and then some of the analytics. So great to be here, and thanks to the audience for giving me the opportunity to share some of the perspectives from both the enterprise IAM perspective as well as the evolving digital transformation that we're experiencing within the industry. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kaushal. And Mark, you've got your separate mic over there.
Oh,
so,
I do.
Yeah. And so what does it mean to be a tech lead for IAM at NextEra?
Oh boy, a lot of headaches, a lot of gray hair.
Not as much as
that. No. I'm getting there. We're setting a high bar.
All right.
Basically, what I do is I work with our transformation partner, which is EY, and I work with the actual silos within NextEra. I guide, from an IAM perspective, the technical direction of the program. So I'm there basically as a product owner. Excuse me, I'm a product owner. So through the technology piece, I guide the program in general. I work with leadership to understand their requirements. I work with the application owners. I work with the business owners to understand their requirements and translate those into technical requirements and technical direction.
Okay, great. So, topic here of digital transformation is quite the buzzword trend these days. Want to get a little more detailed about that, and we often hear about the needs for improved customer experience. Not just for your customers, though, but for scenarios like citizen access to government services, supply chain partner access, even employee access, right, to improve their experiences at work. Are those some of the drivers, Kaushal, or what are some of the other drivers that you see just from on the business side of the equation for digital transformation?
Yeah, Gerry. So I think for us, most interestingly, as you look at, oh wow, the voice is loud now. As we look to power utilities as well as some of the other customers across the verticals of the sectors, we're beginning to see digital revolution happening everywhere, right? So we spoke about the financial services a few days back. We also touched upon some of the solutioning that we displayed within our Radiant Logic panel discussion, and in the keynote, we talked broadly about the industry at large. In terms of how the digital transformation is actually evolving and changing some of the business landscapes as well. In terms of the key factors, to Gerry's questions directly, is essentially within the power utility sectors, we're beginning to see the revolution take place, right? We're beginning to see changes within the business models where technologies and business processes are getting more innovative. So as a consumers, we're beginning to see services rendered through your mobile applications, where it allows you the flexibility to make payments or even get an alert for your outages within the area. Right? So you're able to manage a lot of that customer experience through the mobile app friendliness. You're also beginning to see innovations in technology front where we're bringing digitization concepts to IAM specifically, as well as the broader technologies as a business model. So you look at renewable and power distributions, you look at smart grids, and you're beginning to see the smart meters being rolled out across the nation, as well as you're looking at the overall operational efficiencies where you're empowering and the workforce that we're beginning to see specifically within the access management areas, where we're introducing concepts like robotic process automations to drive the efficiencies within your access management administration processes. And lastly, we're beginning to see, which I like the most, is essentially a broader business transformations where we're really having the business and IT leaders coming together, working very cohesively, adapting to the business and market demands, primarily focusing on the consumer behaviors, right? So in terms of the ease of use from the very beginning of the registration to the actual deployment and consumptions of the services. We'll talk a little bit into later in the presentations of what that transformation means for Mark and his team at NextEra as we're rolling out the IAM platform, right? It's a multi-year journey as we've experienced in multiple sectors. And lastly, driving the innovations and having a culture of continuous improvement fabric across their organization. So those are sort of the three key factors that we're experiencing across the sectors.
Right, and Mark, I mean, specific to the energy sector, we've heard about smart meters, for example, for a while now, for a few years. And now, of course, smart appliances, so maybe you can even reach into our homes and monitor energy, or those devices can communicate out to you as an energy provider. Or, for example, if I've got solar panels on my house and I'm generating excess energy, you know, can I sell that back to you? I mean, are these all things that you are looking at now as a...
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
and that's the thing is, you know, power utilities are monolithic organizations, right? They're very slow moving. They have a lot of regulations around them, particularly nuclear. So it takes a longer time to kind of catch the wave, so to speak, of digital transformation. And now that we're seeing in the market the maturation of IoT, the maturation of smart grid, and all these other innovations, the leaders are seeing that we can capitalize on that, and we can get this data in and utilize it in ways where we can chop and slice it, we can understand our markets better, we can understand our customers better. But also, as everybody I'm sure is aware in the room, you know, we're asked to do more with less and quicker, right? So they're seeing that with this maturation that's coming, they're able to basically piggyback on this new technology to say, okay, I'm not trying to replace jobs, I'm trying to replace tasks. I'm trying to automate tasks and make my job more efficient, make my sector more efficient, thereby putting more at the bottom line.
Well, and I think both of you touched on, you know, process changes, and I'd like to address specifically, you know, organizational changes, because this is a real, from what I've seen, a real cultural shift as well. And maybe you can speak to that first, Mark, because it's not just changing the technology, you know, installing smart meters, but it's, I imagine, changing the behavior of line technicians, of customer service representatives, and everyone within the NextEra.
Yes,
itself,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, doing you know, predictive data analysis where a customer calls in and we already know their problem, or we go one step ahead and we notify them to say, no, we understand you have an outage in your area. It's going to be 15 minutes, and coordinating that with our trucks and our fleet so that as soon as an outage happens, a truck is delivered to that area without the customer even calling, right? So that's where we're trying to gain certain efficiencies. And to the organizational piece, traditionally many utilities have been very siloed. We're currently in an unregulated, regulated environment. So what we've seen is a lot of these organizations, and I've heard speakers talk to this throughout the conference, we see a lot of the siloing happening where you've got multiple platforms across multiple silos, and it's costing a lot of money. And what we're trying to do now is, through these digital transformation projects, understand what the landscape is out there, right? And what can we utilize, what tools do we have, and then utilize partners to say, we don't have the resources to go out and look at all these vendors. You know we need a wrench, but you need to tell us, do we need a crescent wrench or a monkey wrench?
Monkey wrenches, all right.
Monkey.
So, Kaushal,
Yep.
you know, as a technology vendor, we are not experts in organizational dynamics or, you know, corporate strategy from the board level, you know, from the executive suite on down. You know, like Mark, you know, we're technologists ourselves. We're dealing at that level in the organization, but you know, the transformation also has to happen from the exec level down. Can you describe some of your actions or interactions as a EY strategic consultant? Do you have those kind of conversations? You know, how effective is that to help us, right? Because we are also trying to make these kind of changes within the technology stack, but we also need that executive support for the funding. And as you pointed out, this is not something that happens in 3 months or 6 months. You know, this is a longer journey. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely, Gerry. And you know, that's been actually one of the most exciting part of this journey, right? As you heard me before, is that digital transformation for us is not so much about just the emerging and embracing the technologies, but essentially it comes down to how you're managing that business transformation and understanding that change in the thought and in the organizational culture. And the exciting part at NextEra and a number of other sectors that we've worked across within the power utilities is that the leadership at the top understands. You know, they're reacting to the various market demands. They're evolving to understanding the new technologies in the marketplace, such as IoTs, understanding the cloud implications. They're understanding the access management is actually in the forefronts of a number of the dialogues. And our journey really begins with the CEO and the CIOs. You know, the first, as I reflect back, you know, we began the discussions with Mark and his team back in sort of September or October of last year, where we came in, we had the presentations around how do we prepare NextEra for that transformational journey? And what does that mean to the bottom line? Because often, Gerry, as you pointed out, there's a lot of cost implications to these implementations and transformational programs. These are not your short 3-6 months implementations of technologies, support and operationalization, but although these tends to run into multi-year, multi-million-dollar investments. And some of you probably came and attended our sessions around the cruise lines and media entertainment sectors, where we're actually looking at numbers of $500 million to $1 billion, right? So these are the transformational opportunities at a very large scales. At NextEra, the numbers are kind of close to that similar range of that, although not as high, but the complexity comes in with nuclear plants, when we look at the grids, when we look at their internal employee enablement programs. So when we have the conversations with the CEO, it's around customer-centric, which is essentially how are we going to react to the market? What are the market demands and the user experience focus? That gets into the personas, the buyer behaviors, and things of that nature, where you see a lot of implications of the application's usage, where you see the smart technology being leveraged when you leave your homes, the consumption goes down, you're getting better alerts, payment information, things of that nature. Distribution is the big theory and then the concepts around what NextEra is doing at the moment. Second comes down to the operational excellence, which is essentially as we go out to enhance and achieve these business objectives of generating the bottom line, what does it mean for our internal employees and how are we going to empower the employees to support that broader rollout and the transformation in the industry? And then the third and the most important one is the innovations in technology and business, right? How do we drive that innovative thinking? And we've been coaching a number of our executives, including chief marketing officers, chief digital officers, and chief privacy officers, essentially to think beyond the vertical innovations, right? Start thinking about horizontally. Think about what other organizations within your peer sectors are doing. Think about how you can take your existing business processes and digitize those process models to achieve the efficiencies that are required both from the bottom line perspective, reducing cost, improving profit, but also leveraging the same opportunities to enhance the overall experience, not from the consumption perspective, but internally interoperability between the various departments. And that's been one of the most exciting journeys of the process here at NextEra, is the support and the sponsorships that we receive directly from the top up has been extremely admirable and very, very friendly to us in terms of presenting the strategies and being able to showcase that in the marketplace.
And if I could just piggyback on that a little bit, the executives are at the point now with the maturation of the technology that they don't just want it right now, they want it done correctly, right? So they're willing to spend the money, take the time to do it right, and they look to people like myself and my peers, not to know the answers, but to ask the right questions of the Kaushals, of the Gerrys, right? To make sure that we understand what they're going to be bringing to the table, and is it going to be effective for our enterprise?
Yeah, that's great points, and I must say, Kaushal, that it seems like the execs need to hear that from the outside. I recall when I worked in a corporate environment, they didn't listen to the folks inside the building. It was more looking for guidance from outside. So we definitely value that input for sure. Now, if we could dig a little deeper and talk about digital identity and access management, the previous couple of sessions talked a little bit about microservices and APIs, and obviously that's a big part of modernization of delivering services and products to customers and suppliers. How does that impact our thoughts around identity and access management, which in many cases is a pretty monolithic environment in and of itself? So Mark, do you want to start on that and what you guys, maybe just generally speaking,
Sure.
what you're thinking about on that front?
Absolutely. So, and that's where we're again, going from that monolithic organization, slow moving, do it right now, to do it right. We're moving away from that CSV model, right? That modal FTP, and we're moving more towards ESB, the microservices, because that's where we see a lot of the efficiencies gained. We have a lot less infrastructure that needs to support that. We have one bus across the whole enterprise that everybody can plug into. And then that also gives us the opportunity to connect to external vendors, external applications much easier. And the reason we do this is, and I was talking to somebody yesterday, I called it reverse compartmentalization, right? You can play in our playground, but you can have your own sandbox. So we can come up with these designs, come up with these strategies, give them to the app teams, give them to the system owners, and they can do with it what they want, and they can come to us when they're ready, right? We're taking a business approach, right, where it's always been IT foisting ourselves upon the business. We're getting away from that. We're encouraging the business to come to us and say, what is it that you need? What is it you want? And we can tell you what we can deliver.
Sure.
Or we can go out to the market and say, this is what the market can deliver to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a question for Matt later. Can an FTP of a CSV file be a microservice? From your last session, sorry about that. Kaushal, so another thing that I have observed is as we break down those monolithic identity infrastructures, we're also looking to break out of some of that hard-coded role-based models or hard-coded rules within apps or now even within microservices. Can you talk to the issue of now trying to apply more of a policy-driven approach, across the set of services within identity management itself, as well as those microservices for the business-facing or consumer-facing apps that we're developing?
Absolutely, Gerry. And I think just to add on to what Mark stated on the last one is essentially, we're beginning, when we had the conversations with the CIO, majority of the focus in the technology tends to lean towards DevOps, right? So we've all been through that journey. We've all heard about what that implications are, but essentially it's with the business context. And on the business transformation perspective, a lot of these projects are ran through the agile methodologies and essentially standing up an agile environment, and which is a very big organizational cultural change, because a lot of traditionally things have been ran on a traditional project management style, waterfall, where we're beginning to see this drastic shift towards agile and DevOps. Specifically around the RBAC and role governance aspect of things, what we're starting to look at is, how do we drive your enforcements and authorization decisions based on policies? So with respect to Nextera, we have hundreds and hundreds of entitlements across thousands of applications. And to make context of what those really drive and allow end users to have access to, specifically to the resources of platforms and applications, we're beginning to evolve the policy-based access controls within our environment. So in terms of, we've all heard about role authorizations being broken into business, IT, and sort of system administrative privilege, higher elevated access. You think about getting into the nuclear plants. You think about someone having access to the smart grids. You think about the meter controls from the power distribution and generation aspect of the renewable energies. These are all sort of very complicated access governance models that are existing in the processes today at Nextera. So the approach we've taken is essentially first, really understanding the business context behind these applications, doing the rationalizations to really understand the usage based upon the analytics and the behavior data that we collect near real time. Then we sit with the business owners, application owners, the process owners to really understand the assignments of these roles and entitlements and the mapping of these entitlements to the applications, to look for an opportunity where we can sort of reduce the number of role sets that are out there. And then we transform those into a business-driven policies, right, which are essentially if you are starting as a new associate versus as a contingent contractor working in certain business units, what implications of those are to the roles. So this also cuts down the manual labor it takes for us to automatically or manually provide the provisioning and deprovisioning of the role construct. And then essentially that helps us to define the broader business models where we're actually then able to make a very concise role mapping and role mining exercises across the various business units. So one of the initiatives at Nextera is essentially as we put up the IAM system is to bring the intelligence with regards to when the user comes and initiates a request based upon the persona, based upon the business unit, based upon the job function, the system automatically recommends a set of priority roles. And if they don't align with that specific recommendation, then only the user has the option to select additional set of roles. And all of that role construct is sort of powered through the Axiomatics engines, where we're leveraging the role mining governance, we're leveraging IGA solutions to power the orchestration, but all of that comes and is driven through the business context of how the roles are mapped by the business units and the functions of the applications.
Okay. And Mark, I wanted to follow up something you brought up earlier about dealing with regulated and unregulated sides of the business. And did you say you're trying to blend that or manage them in a similar fashion now? And also, what other impacts does that have on things like, how do you purchase technology software now? A lot of it is delivered as a service. Are those models suitable? So a couple of business-related questions there for you.
Right, so that is a big struggle for us. The generation side is regulated, whereas the marketing side is unregulated. So what the struggle there is, the regulated side is a CapEx model, so it's much more difficult for us to get these subscription-based services in, whether it's cloud or an Okta or a Ping, right? The unregulated side doesn't have that barrier. They're OpEx, so they can actually be more agile, small a, right? They could be more agile, but while they're also being big agile, right? And so that's where we have a little bit of friction, where the regulated side architects have to try and come up with solutions that fit everybody, right? Whereas the unregulated side has a lot more freedom. So that's one of the struggles we have with the vendors, where we go to them and say, love your product, what can you do for us from a licensing perspective? Subscription. Well, it's a lot harder to make that call, right, than it is, well, if you give me perpetual licensing.
That's really interesting. So one size all, in this case, a subscription model doesn't necessarily work for you. So
that's correct,
It itself poses a challenge. It's interesting. Well,
Jerry, I'll just build upon
yes,
that as
sure.
well. Is not only for the power utilities, but that's been a common theme across the sector, right? We're beginning to see discussions and really decisions on the products around the perpetual versus subscriptions, where a lot of the organizations wants to go the perpetual route to minimize the cost, given the broader transformational journey aspect of these programs.
All right, good points. Well, we've come up to the deadline for this session. I want to thank both Kaushal and Mark for the discussion, for the input here. Appreciate that very much. Thanks for attending, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you, Jerry. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all very much.